Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time, our self-help segment. Always very glad to be joined by my friend and colleague, Father Willie Todd. Father Todd, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, face to face.
Yeah, it's a really good thing, Father. So thank you for being present. You know, it's interesting as we talk about how people deal with issues in life. One of those things that is the most important is being present.
Right.
And I think that that's kind of the greatest gift that we can give to people. And when it comes to grief, not being present can often impact that recovery.
That's right. Because I think, well, we have to go through various stages that we talked about before, you know. But what happens is that if you don't go through those stages, or you don't have the opportunity to go through those stages, then you still got to go through them. But they not. You got to do something extra to do it. In other words, like if you don't have a funeral, you don't have an opportunity to experience the sorrow and the loss and so forth like that. And a lot of people, didn't have funerals. I mean, or they had postponed funerals, or maybe even memorial services where we don't have a body, and it's not quite the same. I mean, if you don't have a body there, but you could still celebrate the person's life, but it's a little different. But sometimes you just got to go off the room by yourself and cry, and just do the loss. I'm always not surprised, but what Jesus did, like when John the Baptist died, he went off by himself. We heard about the death, to a quiet place. And it's just to be alone, just to think about what that meant to him.
Right.
That John the Baptist was his herald, and when he lost his life by Herod, he right away he said when he heard about the news, he went off by himself. And I think we need to go off by ourselves a lot of times.
I think very often people are afraid to do that.
Right.
A lot of people, when dealing with grief and loss, are afraid to be alone with their thoughts.
Right.
And I guess it depends. Jesus, being the most self-actualized person that we know, was able to process things probably better and in a way that few of us can. But there is some value in us kind of being alone to get our head straight, if you will, and just kind of to put things in perspective. But I think a lot of people really struggle with that. I think people struggle with not knowing what they want to do or how to do it.
Right.
It's almost kind of like this hurricane preparation and storm preparation and all the stress that comes with it. People do things differently in how they prepare.
Right.
Much like I think people respond to grief in different ways.
Right. I think like in a hurricane, a lot of times when you come back, let's say in your place is beat up a lot, you kind of see that, and you naturally mourn for the loss. You lost this, your grief. A lot of times when somebody dies and you don't have a chance to see them, it's like you say, you're scared to go to self, but you still got to go through the pain of that loss, and it's okay. I mean, to experience that, and that's why it's good to go by yourself sometimes, because I mean, maybe you might be a little embarrassed if you cry, but go ahead and cry, whatever it takes, just to get the feelings out and get in touch with your feelings. That's the first thing. How do I feel right now about
Right.
the loss of this loved one? And what does that mean for me now? Him or her, had a relationship, and what does that mean now? We don't have that same relationship. I mean, we can still talk to people, but they're not in the flesh, But what does that really mean? And I've definitely lost something. If I have lost somebody, and what does that mean internally for me?
Yeah.
And whatever feelings would come, it's okay. To just get in touch with those feelings and go through the process, and then, you can come out better than if you hold them in. That's
Right.
the thing, yeah.
Yeah, a very wise person said, to be able to deal with loss, you have to deal with loss.
Yeah.
Well, and just,
Yeah.
but
Right.
a lot of people don't. So the ones that you were talking about, and again, I'm only going to use the generalization that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross used for how we deal with grief, that the 5 stages. And again, These are a whole lot more like a spiral staircase
Right.
than they are the stages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are not sequential because people go back and forth, but they're denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I think that very often people sometimes have all 5 of these at one time in different ways. But to be able to process and maybe get to some point of acceptance, you've got to go through that whole point of disbelief. You've got to go through the denial. You got to be a little put off, if you will, because anybody that loses something that's special to them, they're going to have some strong emotion or feeling. Anger is appropriate. It's appropriate to be angry.
Right.
It's not necessarily always appropriate in what you do with that anger.
Right.
And that's why I think it's important to talk about.
Right.
And how we're doing that now, and we're going to continue that conversation as we're kind of wrapping up in this first session. But just being able to process that, it can be healthy to do by yourself, and it can be healthy to do that with others at the right time.
Right.
What happens is, again, as I mentioned, we're wrapping up. For somebody that's in denial and another person who's in anger, if they're in those two different stages, very often there can be some conflict there.
Right.
And so that's why being alone can be very helpful.
Yeah.
So it's really a valuable point that you
It's
make.
really both ends too. It's not like either I'm alone or with others. It can be.
It can be
It can be
both.
both things, and
Right.
maybe it should be both things.
That's a really good point, Father. And so here during COVID, we grieve them differently. And here during a pending hurricane, in the midst of COVID, we talk about stress, and sometimes stress really interrupts the grieving process.
Right. Because we have to, like right now, we're looking at the television and saying, where's it really going, and what do I have to do, and am I in harm's way, so forth like that. And so we really don't have time to grieve. I mean, you have to, it's self-preservation right now, for a lot of people. I mean, at least this is there in the cone, you might say, of the storm,
Yeah, and that's very often, that's where the big issue can come in, because sometimes those stressors put our grief off, and if we don't deal with the grief, a lot of times it becomes from a grief resolution to complicated grief.
Right.
And complicated grief is that type of grief where we're not able to process it, and that grief can often make an impact or a difference in the activities of our daily living, so that it really complicates our ability to process really anything.
Yeah. We really have to deal with all our problems, you might say, grief and everything else. If we don't, they'll keep coming back.
Yes,
I mean,
they will rear their ugly head.
Rear their ugly head. If we don't, if we did something we are ashamed of, we need to deal with that and get beyond that, unless it keeps bothering us. It keeps raising its ugly head, like you say. Yeah. That's a good metaphor. And I think the same thing with grief. If we don't take care of the grief, it's going to keep coming back. Right. That I never really. I never cried for my father type of thing, or my mother, whatever the person is, something like that, because I was preparing for a storm.
Right.
Whatever, doing
I couldn't
whatever
do this because of a hurricane. And then keeping in mind that there are going to be triggers that can really bring back the impact of that loss. There can be a lot of things that take place, but there's a healthy way to go about that and changing. And one of those lines, they say, time heals all wounds, and therapeutically we know that not to be true.
Right.
But the longer the distance is from that, I think very often each year we may be able to deal a little bit better if we're doing the work. Because we got to do the work through the time.
You got to do the work, yeah. And you can't get around it. Yeah.
Right, and just say, it'll be a year, I'll be fine. It'll be 2 years, and I'll be fine. In fact, one of those things that's recommended is after the loss of someone very significant to you, you shouldn't really make major life decisions for 2 years. Now,
good advice.
Right, unless a hurricane comes and takes you home, and I think that and quite frankly, those are things that are very real.
Right.
I mean, those are real possibilities, and so very often I think if we kind of keep in mind that stressors truly can limit or differ our ability to grieve. And I'll just give you my example. We lost a family member, a distant family member, and my heart goes out to the immediate family members because there's so many things they can't do,
Right.
and we can't be with them
Right.
to help them deal with it. And it's one of the areas that I kind of thrive in. It's one of the things it's one of the gifts that God kind of gave you and I about helping people deal with very troublesome times and difficulty and death. And I can't really do anything but stay supportive from a distance.
Yeah. And of course, I lost my brother a couple of weeks ago, and he lived in Houston, and of course we were expecting him to die because he had Lou Gehrig's disease,
ALS.
ALS.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, it's a disease that kind of eats away at your body until you have nothing left but your maybe blinking your eyes and your mind.
Right.
Your mind's good, so you know what's going on. So, but you can't do anything with your body, and it's
Right.
so sad. So there is the pre-grieving too. You know that we really lost him a little bit
Right, as his disease was progressing. Right.
and almost you were praying that God would take him because so the pre-grieving, if you want,
Anticipatory grief is what we call it.
Yeah, that's good. But still, it doesn't. You still need to grieve, and one of the things that one of the ceremonies were in Houston itself at his church, but we wasn't able to have. We just had burial here, which I think we made the best of it that we could,
Right.
because we gathered together and people expressed their feelings, and then we went to the grave itself, and we sang a hymn or something like that, and so forth. So we did the best we can, but we still need a memorial service where people can come together and grieve together and maybe celebrate his life too, and get that perspective.
Right, and the sometimes the limitations that are placed because of where we are with COVID prevents us from really getting that full experience of the love that other people had.
Right.
And to be able to grieve together.
Right.
To be able to share your grief.
Right.
And to have people kind of absorb that with and for you. I think that's what people are kind of missing.
Yeah. And that, before a funeral, we usually come up and you shake a hand or hug somebody that you know, and that's part of the grieving process.
Yes.
And it's very important. And so I think that we wasn't able to have that, but it's on hold.
Right.
Like that.
I think it's important for people to realize that whatever the timeline, whatever the stressors, whatever it is that's impacting you in your life and your grief, you can find a way to work through it and find a way to heal some.
Yes. Healing is always possible. A lot of times, I don't think people want healing because healing is not something that happens, boom. People look for miracles. They don't want healing. But healing takes a while. It's just like you have a little, a bad leg or something, or a scar in your leg. It takes a while to heal. And inside takes a while to heal, too.
It's a really good analogy.
But I think people want, okay, I'll just wave the magic wand, I'm fine. But we're not fine. We just got to get in touch with why we aren't fine, and it's okay not to be fine.
And it's okay to have scars.
Yeah, that's right.
Because sometimes the wounds that we experience, and you were talking about a physical one, and it takes a while to heal, emotional wounds,
Right.
grief, those wounds can heal.
Right.
They take time, and we got to do some work.
Right.
We got to figure out what was important about this relationship, like you mentioned. Sometimes when that relationship changes, then it helps you kind of process the next level.
Right.
I guess it kind of becomes the opposite of a relationship where you get to know someone, you get closer to them, and you feel like you can open up on those different levels of a relationship. And then that loss of a relationship, you realize that relationship is changing. It doesn't have to be a bad thing,
Right.
but it's a change.
Yeah. And a lot of times, of course, like I'm the oldest in my family, and he was the fourth child. Anyway, so a lot of times, like towards the end, we're trying to help him out, and he didn't take some of our help, my help, not just my help. It was a whole group of my brothers tried to help him. So I have to let go of that, and I have to work on that because I can't do anything about it. One, but and also, when you look at somebody, especially when they're younger than you, you kind of see their faults, and probably maybe you can see my faults too. I mean, but you can see his faults more as well as his virtues. I'm not saying he was a bad person,
No, right.
but we all a mixture of good and bad.
Sure.
And so when you try to help somebody, especially when they need help, and they pretty much don't do what you suggest, and you say, well, you kind of throw your hands up and say, what's the use, you know? But I have to let go of that because I can't do anything about it. I mean, for a long time I haven't been able to do a thing about it. But now, since it's final, you know, I just got to forgive him and say, okay, he's with the Lord, and so that's it.
Yeah. You bring up two really good points, Father. One is that we tend to have guilty thoughts
Right.
about whether or not we did enough or should have done more or should have done things differently. Or we have guilty thoughts about somebody who maybe didn't accept our help.
Right.
And so there's some guilty thinking. And guilt is a thought, not a feeling.
Right.
Guilt's a thought that brings up emotions. But very often that guilt is something that we've got to find a way to give some second very important key term, forgiveness.
Right.
Forgiveness is the key to healing.
Oh, yeah.
It really is. And if we can just have some perspective on forgiving ourselves for wherever we are,
Right.
you know, coming back to that house and seeing it and just not wanting to believe that it's happening, that's just a reality. You know, denial is the first stage. It's important to go through it.
Right.
It's important that we experience, and then it's okay to be mad about it. It's not okay to destroy the person's house next door to yours because a tornado happened to come through and took yours out, but not theirs.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's
Right.
not okay. But identifying it and being able to forgive ourselves for how we're feeling,
Right.
and it gives us a better point of acceptance.
No, I have an example of somebody I met a long time ago, and of course he's dead now. But anyway, he was about 75 years old, okay? And he had an older sister who was kind of, well, at least according to his thing, was mean to him. But he was never able to forgive her. And so he died at 75. His sister was long dead, long in the ground. But he held on to that hurt all his life instead of letting go so he could be free. And of course, I tried to help him. I don't know if I had too much success, but because he just held on to it so much, you know, that was his story.
It was one of those things that he allowed to define him.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
that, I think, very often people get comfortable with their anger and people get comfortable with their grief.
Yeah.
And they sometimes feel bad or badly that they're feeling better.
Or
They're feeling badly that they shouldn't.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
But
Father.
I would say sometimes they like to be a martyr too.
Yeah.
Martyrs who we recognize in the church as being great people. So if I'm a martyr, I'm a great person. Well, that's not true. I mean, in this sense, you're not a martyr if you don't let go and forgive.
Right.
And so playing the role of a martyr is different from really being a martyr being killed.
Yeah. And quite frankly, and forgiveness has got to be the key in that. And I think more often than not, that forgiveness has got to start internally. That we've got to find a way to forgive ourselves.
Oh, definitely.
And then it will allow us to forgive others.
Yeah, so many people don't forgive themselves. I mean, that meet and they hold on to something that happened a long time ago and just never let go.
And you don't have to take it to the grave.
No, you don't have to take it
You
to
can
the grave,
let
no.
it go and not necessarily
You can
take
be
it
free.
to the
You
grave.
can be free.
Be free. So if you've learned anything tonight, it's that you can be free. You don't have to take it to the grave. And that's Father Willie Todd, and I'm Keith Weisheit. Thank you for joining us in this self-help segment. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming when we continue.